first heard about the Northern Specials would have been 2009. I was working as the editor of Crafty Carper magazine at the time, and during that year Gaz Fairham was doing a lot of features for the magazine, and I was going out and spending quite a bit of time on the bank with him putting these features together. And I remember Gaz saying to me that he'd struck up a deal with CC Moore to produce his own signature range of pop-ups that he was calling Northern Specials, and at this stage he hadn't finalised the recipe. He had a few sort of test batches that he was testing, and I remember him, when we was out on the bank, having different batches to test. So yeah, that would have been 2009. I was quite lucky to get involved actually in the testing stages with Gaz on the Northern Specials. Basically, as I said, I was working as an editor of a magazine, so I was quite impartial at the time. I wasn't able to have any kind of allegiances with a particular bait company. I could just pick and choose the baits that I wanted to use. Gaz was aware of this, so he asked me once, I think it was sort of getting towards the autumn of 2009, and he said to me, like, if I give you a few of the different batches, do you want to have a go with them and just sort of, you know, give some feedback on which ones are the most productive? And I was fishing at Bundy's Pit at the time in Cambridgeshire, which has got good form in the autumn, so it was a good kind of place to try them out, because there was definitely some bites to be had during that period of the year. So I was more than happy to help out and just offer what feedback I could to Gaz that he could use for the development of the baits. My first thoughts when I first got my hands on the test batches that Gaz sent up to me was that I would happily use any of the three that he sent. I remember there was I think the 3 tubs, and there was marked NS1, NS2, NS3. And from memory, the smell of each one wasn't massively different. It was quite subtle differences. I presume they just changed the flavour levels or a couple of ingredients. It wasn't extreme differences between the 3. I think at this stage it was nearing the end of the sort of development stage, and they were just honing recipes. So I got the 3 different versions, and yeah, I'd have been happy to fish with any of those 3 baits, which was good from my point of view, because I didn't really want to put out a hook bait that I didn't have confidence in just from the smell at the start. But all 3 smelt really nice, and I thought, yeah, they're onto a winner here, even before I'd even put them in the lake. The first venue that I used the baits on was the aforementioned Bundy's Pit. I was already fishing there sort of every week anyway. I received the baits in early October, so I decided on that next weekend I was going to use them, and I was going to use them on all 3 rods. I was going to give them a proper good go so I could give Gaz the best feedback possible. I remember I got down to the lake and I got into one of my favourite swims for that time of year, called the Winter. It always fished really well from October to the end of December, and yeah, I was really happy to be getting into a swim where I thought, you know, there's a good chance of a bite, and, you know, hopefully catch my first one on these test baits, give me a bit of confidence straight away in them. So in that particular swim, I like to fish all 3 rods on one baited area, and this particular spot I was fishing, it was 38 foot of water, nice firm clay area, and I put all 3 rods on that one spot, and I fished one on an NS1, one rod on an NS2, and one on an NS3. I thought, what fairer way could you sort of test the baits than to put all 3 of them on the same baited area, put a load of free bait out, and then invite the carp in, and we'll see which one the carp prefer. So yeah, that first session went very well. I think I had 2 or 3 bites, all coming on the NS1, including my biggest ever mirror from the lake, a fish they call the yo-yo mirror. It was 36 pound, really old fish with some big plated scales on its side. One of my most desirable fish I wanted from the lake at the time, and I couldn't believe it. First time out with these test baits of Gaz's, and I'm looking in the net, and I've got one of the biggest mirrors in the lake, and like I say, my biggest ever mirror from the lake. So yeah, first impressions, fantastic. Confidence sky high, and I couldn't wait to get on the lake again and try the baits again. The time that I was involved in helping out with the testing would have probably been about 3 or 4 months in total. Basically the autumn winter period that I fished on Bundy's that year. I carried on using those 3 variants of the NS through that period. Caught quite a few more fish on them. I had another one of the A team from the lake, a fish called the Carp World Cover. That was over 41 pounds, and that again came on the NS1. So having caught, you know, the 36 pound mirror and then the 41 pound common on the NS1, obviously there was a you could see that my preference was certainly leaning towards the NS1 out of the 3 test batches. Like I say, yeah, I think I probably stopped using them about January, when I basically stopped fishing for the rest of that winter. I kind of rekindled my relationship with the Northern Specials, I would say 4 or 5 years after I'd helped out with that testing phase. Basically, I'd got a ticket that year, I think it was 2015, for the lake in Cambridgeshire they called the Caravan Park Lake, which was home to a 50-pound linear, one of the best fish in the country. And I knew on that particular lake I was going to have to be doing quite a bit of chodrig fishing. It's low stock, very, very weedy, and there's very, very few clear areas. A friend of mine had done well using the chod, and I knew that was going to most likely play a big part in my fishing on that lake. So I was looking for a sort of a bright white hook bait that also had very, very good buoyancy, that could stay up on the chod for 1 or 2 nights, no problem. And the important thing was, because I really like to use glugged up hook baits, I needed a pop-up that I could glug and it would still be buoyant. The Northern Special is available in the NS Plus, which is a super buoyant version, and it ticked all the boxes for me. My mate Jimmy was working at CC Moore at the time. I spoke to him, I said I need a white pop-up that's mega buoyant for the chod, and he said get on the Northerns. And of course I had the confidence in that recipe because I'd used it a few years previously during that testing, so it made total sense to me to give the Northerns a go. So for that spring 2015, got a couple of tubs of the Northerns. Also in that spring of that year, I had a trip booked to go to Spitfire Pool in Norfolk, which is home to, again, one of the best fish in the country in my opinion, the wood common, a 50-pound common with these beautiful white tips on its tail. I got to the lake. I didn't go there with any kind of set agenda about how I was going to fish for those fish, because you never know on a new venue. I chucked all my baits and all my tackle, everything for all different scenarios in the van, and went to the lake. Having walked the lake, spent a few hours watching the fish and sort of having a little lead about, it became apparent that I was going to probably attack the lake with the hinge stiff rig, and again a nice big pop-up. There's quite a lot of weed on the deck, and with such a low stock of fish and trying to target a particular big fish, I do like a big blatant pop-up. So having decided I was going to go in with a hinge, I sort of opened up my hook bait bag. I've got 6 or 7 tubs of hook baits in there, and I'm looking for all these different hook baits. What am I going to use? And I'm looking at the Northerns. They're a white pop-up, my favourite colour. They smell awesome, mega buoyant for holding up that hinge. Again, I was going to be placing these rigs very close in, and I was going to probably leave them there for 2 days at a time, because I want to keep disturbance at a minimum on such a small lake. And I thought, yeah, these will be perfect. So the rods went out on Northerns. I think I caught 4 fish that week from the lake out of a stock of 12 or 13 carp. I had a 30-pound mirror, and on the Friday of that week session, I managed to catch the wood common on the white Northern on a hinge stiff rig over just a couple of handfuls of hybrid boilies at the time. That was the feed bait I was using at the time, and I was fishing the Northern Specials over the top. And yeah, when I got her in the net, I looked at this massive 50-pound common in the net with that little white pop-up hanging out of its mouth. I thought, thanks Jimmy, you've helped me catch a fish there, mate. So I caught that fish on the Friday, and then the following week, I think it was a Monday, I was down back at the Caravan Lake pre-baiting, ready for a midweek overnight later on in the week. I was down with the spom and putting in a load of bait onto an area. Whilst I was baiting up, I actually saw my target, the big linear, show. It came half out the water, and you can't mistake a 50-pound carp when half of it's out of the water, creating silhouette against the sun. Huge, great frame, and it was about 30 yards away from the spot I was baiting. So as you can imagine, I was really itching to get back to the lake. I think it was 2 days later, after a day of work in Essex at the office, I dropped on for an overnighter, and I wrapped up my rods very quickly with the chod rigs, put them out with the white northerns on again to the spot I've been baiting, and then with the throwing stick I put 20 or 30 baits out, and that was it. Went to bed nice and confident as you do, and yeah, 6 o'clock the next morning, one of the rods has rattled off, and after an almighty battle where this fish just ragged me through weed bed after weed bed, I was starting to think, you know, in my head what fish it could potentially be. Finally bundled a ball of weed in the net, and as I've stripped all this weed out of the net, there it is, the Caravan Park Linear, and again that white Northern Special hanging out of its lip. So that came actually less than 7 days after I'd had the Wood Common at 50. That fish went, I think, 53 pound the linear. So yeah, a brace of 50 pounders in a week on the Northern Specials. The first year back of using them, you know, after 4 or 5 years absence, and yeah, I haven't really looked back since then with the Northerns. So other special standout captures that I've had on the Northerns, there has been a few, to be fair, in the last 5 years or so. But in addition to obviously the Wood Common, which I actually caught for a second time on a Northern, I think 2 years later, I'd gone back to Spitfire to try and catch the other big common in the lake, the Long Common. And yeah, unfortunately, not one for repeats, but yeah, I had the Spitfire Pool Common, the Wood Common again. And yeah, hinge stiff rig again, white Northern again, exactly the same rig, hook bait presentation. So yeah, I think that fish definitely has a bit of a taste for the Northern. So yeah, I caught that one again. And so I say, other than the Spitfire fish and the Caravan Park Linear, there's probably a couple of real standout captures that spring to mind that I had on the Northerns. The first would be the biggest carp that I've ever caught to date, a 67 pound mirror. That was from a syndicate lake in Belgium, 20 odd acre lake, stock of 18 carp, and I'd been granted a guest session there for 48 hours. So as you can imagine, turning up to 20 odd acres of water with less than 1 carp an acre for a 48-hour guestie, having never seen the lake before, didn't really have that much confidence that we were going to catch anything. I was with my good mates Dave and Tony, but it was a beautiful lake, and we thought, you know, we might as well do the weekend here. We've been given permission to fish, so we've all picked our swims. I've gone out in the boat with the Echo Sounder, located a shallow bar area, and then with a leading rod from the boat, I've leaded about, I must have leaded, I think, for nearly an hour. It was choked with Canadian. It looked such a great feature, but I was just really struggling to find a clear area. But all of a sudden, thud, the leading rod's just slapped down, and I've quickly thrown the H block over the side of the boat to mark it. Swapped the rods over. Now I've got my baited rig. I've got a 360 rig with the Northern Special pop-up on. I'm using a size 2 hook and a size 7 flexi ring swivel with that size 2 hook. So quite a lot of metal. I'm sure it'd make a lot of anglers who like to find everything down cringe if they saw it, but I was fishing for a potential 70 pound carp in this lake, so I didn't want to leave anything to chance. So with that big hook and the big swivel, I didn't have to trim the pop-up down. Even that super buoyant Northern just sank perfectly under the weight of the hook and the swivel. I've lowered it down onto the spot. I've felt the lead crack down onto the clear spot, put some particle and some boilie over the top. I've took the rod back to shore from the boat. The night passes uneventfully. I'm starting to think about maybe changing things up when I get a bite out of the blue. I was using braided mainline. I was fishing at about 200 yards, and it was savage straight away. Jumped straight in the boat. Ronnie, the Belgian guy who was guesting us on the lake, jumped in the boat with me, and we got towed all over the lake on the boat. And eventually, this absolute hippo surfaced. Ronnie did a great job scooping it up in the net, and yeah, back to the shore. We weighed her in at 67 pounds, and I was just blown away. That was 2016, so it was the following year after I'd had the 250 pounders in England on the Northerns, and here I was, my first trip abroad on the Northerns, and I've gone and caught a 67 pounder. And yeah, that is a capture that, you know, like I say, it's the biggest carp I've ever caught, might be the biggest carp I ever catch, and it's firmly etched in the memory as one of the special captures. Another capture is from a Lincoln syndicate that I fished called the Foundry. There was probably 3 fish out of a stock of 350 carp in the lake that were on my A-team target list. Fish they call the big trouty, one they call rollies, and one they call the double row linear. All 3 scaly big mirrors. And yeah, my second season on the lake, again on the 360s with the Northern Specials. One particular session, the conditions were perfect, big southwesterly wind hammering into my face, and I had a hit of fish, and one of the fish that I caught was one they call rollies. It was 39 pound. At that stage, it was the biggest fish I'd caught from the lake, and you'll see in the footage that sort of overlays in this video, massive apple slice scales all over it. Without a doubt, one of the best looking carp I've ever caught. And yeah, again, another one of those captures where I look back and think, yeah, the Northern Specials, you know, the name's pretty apt for that bait. It's a special hook bait for sure, and one I have 100% confidence in.